Thank you for coming. A new political party has been formed to contest the West Australian state election on the 13th of March 2021. The WAxit Party has come about through the merger of the Small Business Party and the WA Republic Party. We are gathered here today to launch our 2021 election campaign. The objective of the WAxit Party is to improve the fortunes of West Australian citizens, businesses and industry by achieving autonomy and independence. There's a huge groundswell of support for this to happen. West Australia has suffered since Federation. 90 or so years ago, at a place not far from here, stood the headquarters of the Dominion League. The Dominion League were the proponents of the successful 1933 referendum on West Australia seceding from the Australian Federation. In 1933, the case for secession emphasised that the disadvantage of West Australia could only be resolved through secession, as there was too great a divergence between the economic interests of Western Australia and those of the eastern states. By 1933, the federal structure had institutionalised the economic disabilities of West Australia, and not much has happened in 90 years since then. Astonishingly, that lawful referendum, which had resulted in an overwhelming majority in support of secession, was disallowed by the British Parliament under British law. The matter of secession was not pursued by an incoming Labor government, despite having promised to implement it. A Commonwealth Grants Commission was established after the referendum to address some of the grievances. However, time has passed and it appears that the worm has turned once again. We're just not forgotten, we are marginalised. The East Coast-centric government has always favoured the large voting population centres of the eastern seaboard. The WAxit platform is that West Australia must go its own way. West Australia cannot develop under federalism because we are too small by population and we just don't count. Nothing has changed and nothing will change while we remain part of the Federation. It's a problem that will only get worse for us when we lose yet another member from the House of Representatives at the next federal election. Federal elections are often won or lost before voting even closes in West Australia. The core of the problem at the local level is that major parties in West Australia are just small cogs in a big political wheel. The main concerns of both Liberal and Labor at a state level in West Australia are the political prospects of their organisations at a national level. WAxit changes that. Unlike the major parties, the WAxit Party has no need to toe any federal party line. West Australian government, business and industry has often felt the ill effects of the megaphone diplomacy which emanates from the federal leadership in Canberra, not to mention bullying from premiers and deputy premiers of the larger states. The WAxit Party provides a real alternative for voters to support. Unlike the single-issue party, the WAxit Party's policy is to broaden the economic base of the state, which is currently too dependent on mining and agriculture. West Australia needs greater freedom to develop business and industry to encourage a broader-based economy. This will be achieved by using taxes and revenues generated in West Australia for the benefit of West Australian people, businesses and industries without leakages to other jurisdictions. The WAxit Party will contest seats in the Legislative Assembly and the Legislative Council in the March 2021 state election. The WAxit Party looks forward to bringing the prospects for a real improvement in the fortunes of West Australians for voters to consider in March. I hereby declare the WAxit Party election campaign to be underway. Thank you. And I have time for some questions.
Out of interest, do you have to form your own Army, Navy and Air Force?
Eventually, yes. And if the question goes to budget, there are answers to that, but I'd suggest you look on our website to get those. There's a lot of metrics in there. Well, just briefly, didn't want to get into the metrics, but I will, Gary. New Zealand has a coastline a bit longer than us, about 14,000 miles that they need to look after and patrol and defend. We have a coastline of about 12,000 kilometres that we have to patrol and defend. West Australia at this stage has very, very little of installed military or defence here. we have a regiment of the SAS, we have a very small reserve contingent, and we have the Garden Island Naval Facility, which houses the Collins-class submarines. The federal budget for military is $39 billion. If we were to look at that and say that our 10% contribution to that would be $3.9 million, using the 10% rule, 10% of the population, 10% of business, etc., we would expect to pay 3.9 for a military. New Zealand has a population just under double our size. They have a military budget of $3.8 billion, and they have a military of 9,000 people, and it's a very fine military. So economically, it wouldn't be an issue, and it would be a boost to our economy.
We work with Glenn Drury to try to get elected.
Who?
Preference whisperer.
No, absolutely not. And any party that does that we're aware of, we will expose them for that.
You've danced with Clive Palmer before.
Yep.
He's got lots of money. Would you consider it again? He's trying to find a way into this election.
I don't think he's trying to find a way into this election. I think he's probably a bit bruised from his last two electoral swings. But no, we have not been offered any money. We have not sought any money.
Would you accept any money if it was
Nope.
offered?
Absolutely.
How are you going to fund it?
So far, we're self-funding it from my business, from people with their own donations, Peter McLernon's business. We are more than willing to take donations from Western Australians for the good of Western Australia.
Obviously, the pandemic has created a bit of a us and them.
Absolutely.
So you're sort of hoping to bankroll on that.
That has probably heightened the senses to West Australians, that they realise that there is more to Western Australia than just being the whipping boy of the East Coast. We've driven the national economy from West Australia, but that's not really recognised on the East Coast.
I think the Premier's helped you with that, some of the rhetoric that he's been promoting. About.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We haven't asked him to join the party yet, but you never know.
On the flip side, though, do you think people who feel that sentiment will just vote for Mark McGowan anyway, rather than the full-blown secession?
Mark McGowan has got a lot of support. But I also believe there's a significant groundswell, a huge groundswell of people seeing that West Australia, the only chance for West Australia to succeed, to go forward, is to forge their own way forward. The Federation has become the anchor that we're snagged on, we can't break free of.
How will you approach preferences if you're not engaging the services of a preference whisperer in terms of micro-parties?
With other individual like-minded parties, on a party-to-party basis, without any intermediary.
WA party?
Possibly.
Is there any confusion in the naming of having two parties that sound kind of similar to WAxit, WA party?
WAxit, WA party, I don't think there's any confusion there.
What's up with WA? People get confused around Liberals every year.
Well, and there's more to come, I can tell you that, with the confusion with Liberals.
How come you're not standing as a UAP candidate this time?
Well, there isn't the UAP party in West Australia.
So if he decided to
No,
register a party, you would register Palmer?
I'm not aware of any UAP members in West Australia.
And why do you think Palmer has decided not to contest? Is he running scared?
I wouldn't say he's running scared. I just say he realises that the chances of success are not high.
And why do you think that is?
Probably because his policy towards Western Australia.
Did you tell him that he was boosting McGowan's popularity?
Some time back I did, yeah.
And what was his reaction to
None.
that? What's your referendum policy then? Like, what realistically, if you were to jag a seat somehow, what would you hope to achieve?
Okay. The policy of referendum is really to get a government to go to referendum, to let the actual people of Western Australia decide which way they want to go. An informed referendum, so people are educated as to what it means economically, what it means defence-wise, what it means to education, to medical, etc. What it means to developing a future beyond mining and agriculture, something which no party talks about these days. It's all about the iron ore prices, which today is at $174 a tonne. That's the sort of thing people they talk about. But one day when the iron ore mining runs out, what are they going to do? So unless we broaden our economic base away from largely a single pillar economy, there is no long-term future for this state.
You're from a variety of different parties, Small Business Party,
Yep.
UAP. Aren't you just a bunch of wannabe politicians who are capitalising on a protectionist...
No, not at all. If you understand how the political system works in Western Australia or in anywhere in Australia, to get into Parliament, into politics, we have a system that largely expects that you will either come up through the Liberal national system or the Labor Green system. And those two parties believe that they are the only ones that have a right to political power in the state. So unless you come up through that, you get nowhere. And a lot of people start in that at a young age, in universities and so forth, and they become career politicians without living a real life. They actually haven't been out there at the coalface seeing what happens in the real world. So when you get those people that do come into politics at a later stage in their lives, that have done the hard yards, they've experienced ups and downs in their lives, they may have been through marriages, they may have been through deaths of family people and so forth, that's people that have that experience, but they won't fit in to the Labor or Liberal mold because they haven't been at the young age getting the ticket punched at the right time, they haven't been handing up how to vote cards, etc.
How many candidates did you have lined up so far?
We're probably around a total of about 23, I think, at the moment. I haven't checked the numbers this morning.
And you're going up and lower.
Yes. We filled all our upper house. We're just looking for lower house.
The upper house across the state?
Up across the state, all 6.
And who do you get a preference first, Liberal or Labor?
We haven't gone that far yet.
Who do you think?
No comment, don't know.
Are you open to a deal with either major party?
Depends what we get back in return. That's the game of politics. Okay.
Mr. Sewell, do you think it's prudent for West Australia to go their own way when China is rising and increasingly pushy on Australia?
Yeah, China is rising and pushing on Australia, there's no doubt about that, but I think, as I mentioned, the megaphone diplomacy has not been the right way to manage a good relationship with China.
You talk about your candidates having the hard yards, but none of your candidates now so far have experience in international relations.
From what perspective, like international trade or which perspective?
In terms of international diplomacy and in terms of security development.
That's really something I don't think that really comes into it. I think many of our people have had good international trading relations with China and others, and that will continue. How that's managed by policy with potentially a coalition government or whatever is something that's dealt with later. But certainly China trade and China relationships are a high priority, and a priority to improve the relationship,